And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Bailey Marshall. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I had an opportunity to take a look at your resume as well as your kind of your bio. And what I see from that is determination. And I see commitment, and I also see ambition as well, which is really phenomenal. I would love to kind of dive into, how you got to be kind of a cybersecurity expert, somebody who's in the field is committed to that. But let's start with kind of the early stage of your journey. Like, you were always interested in technology, right?
Yeah, I mean, you grew up as a kid in the 90s, technology and the internet and computers are so new and super interesting. So it's kind of draws you in as a child, this new technology that your parents don't really understand. So I got started just kind of staying up to the wee hours of the morning, kind of to my parents' dismay. Honestly, I got in trouble too many times. Just up super early, messing around on the internet. I started out learning how to code websites with HTML and CSS, which are very easy, they're not hard to learn. It's not like C# programming. It's something that's really easy to pick up. And how I did that was, taking other people's content that they had already made and published and just adding my tweaks. And then as I got more comfortable in understanding how the code worked and how the scripts worked, I was able to kind of add more blocks of code to these scripts that I was writing, to where I was actually writing my own, which was super interesting. But I didn't think it was really much more than a kid interested in the latest and greatest, right? Everybody's got TikTok now, and
but that's exactly my point, Bailey. Most people don't necessarily, even if they're interested in that, so they, and I see, I have kids today, my own, and they're interested in technology, but not so much in the nuts and bolts of it. They're just interested in playing the Xbox or the PlayStation and so on. So, or playing the latest mobile app. So what drew you into having that hands-on experience? Again, it's not totally trivial. I think a lot of people would say, okay, I was interested in technology, but as an observer, not as a doer.
Yeah, and I was actually having a conversation with my husband about this last night. So many more kids are interested in video games now, and with the streaming platforms and things like that, there's so many tweaks you can do on Twitch, Discord servers, and with those things, you do kind of get into the nuts and bolts where, hey, I want to tweak this thing to make it the way that I want it, and then you start getting into, well, I can program this way. So kids nowadays inadvertently are diving into the nuts and bolts of technology just because, for one, it's available. It's interesting because they're being drawn into it in different directions. Video games, social media platforms, things are just more interesting because they're more available.
You can't escape. You can't escape the technology at all. It seems like there just seems to be so much of it in our everyday today life. And so kind of fast forward to that, you joined the Army, right? What made you join the Army? And maybe you can walk me through the initial roles that you fill over there, and then you end up doing some very, highly technical roles as well. So maybe you kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, so I actually went to school for psychology. I got a bachelor's degree in that. Thought I wanted to be a doctor. That was not the case. I am not good at biology, not good at chemistry. So I decided to pursue more of the liberal arts side of psychology. And because of that, I went into the military on a scholarship. So basically I was at the the whim of what the Army was going to give me as far as a job. I had applied for med services because, again, I wanted to do medical. I had also applied for military intelligence because I thought that psychology would have some impact on that. But ultimately, I was given the Signal Corps, which is IT, and I was like, I don't want anything to do with IT. I don't want to build networks. I liked the computer stuff, but I didn't like building infrastructure. That just didn't interest me. But I took it with a grain of salt and was like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make the most of it. And when I got into it, I realized, well, I might not like the networking side of things, but I do enjoy the security. So I was given a voucher for Security Plus through the military, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put all my eggs in one basket and do Security Plus and study for that. Because I could get a certification under my belt. It was a great opportunity. And that's how I kind of took a dive into the security side of things. And this was in 2016. So this was not long ago. I came in with no IT background or anything like that. So I didn't come from a computer science background.
Yeah, and it's so cool. That's exactly what I was mentioning, is that you've accomplished so much in such a short time. And you fairly quickly found out what you like or what you don't like, for that matter. And so in that certification piece, that gave you the foundation of IT and IT security, or cybersecurity for that matter. How was that for someone who comes from a quote unquote, psychology major background to dive into the deep end from a technical perspective? How was that kind of transition for you?
Yeah, so I honestly didn't think I would use my psychology major. I thought that this was a degree that I got so I could commission into the military as an officer, and that was going to be the end of my use of my psychology degree. I did, shortly after getting Security Plus, decide to pursue a master's degree in cybersecurity. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to throw my bachelor's degree away, kind of just put it aside because I can't use it in cybersecurity, can't use it for IT. It's not really relevant. But as I started to develop my interests and things that I was particularly wanting to study, more so offensive security, pen testing, red teaming, and not only those things, but intelligence-driven cyber operations, I started to kind of round back to my bachelor's degree and say, well, I can use psychology because psychology is humans. Humans interact with technology, and that's how we get things like hackers and, people that are looking to steal your data and things like that. So it took me a while to get there, but those are how I kind of tied those two things together, just by kind of exploring my interests and what I actually wanted to do with cybersecurity.
Yeah, and it's interesting that there's always correlation between several disciplines. From a cybersecurity perspective, it seems like there's always this interconnection between the various types of domains. Even when you study, for example, for the CISSP, there's all those domains, right? So there's 12 domains, I believe. So out of those domains, there's quite a few of those that have overlap with other types of disciplines, right? And so when you decided to pursue that master's degree, again, what made you? Again, it's not trivial. You kind of glance over it very quickly. Most people just don't necessarily. They do certifications, but they don't pursue a full-on master's degree. Do you find that was that was very helpful, like in terms of your particular role right now in the Army, or was it the certification more important?
It's a little bit of both. So Security Plus was great because it got me kind of in the door to security and cyber. And then I got my master's degree shortly after that. And I think that benefited me more into looking in the management roles that I currently fulfill in the military. Coming from no computer science background, in my master's degree, I learned how to create cryptographic algorithms, how to analyze malware, multimedia forensics, steganography, things like that I didn't have experience with before, but it really just touched the surface on it, whereas a bachelor's degree would have really deep dived. But that's kind of all I really needed in order to fulfill positions that I'm currently in, such as management of cybersecurity and cyber operations. And then in addition to that kind of set me up for the CISSP. because that's a management level role. So in terms of looking at what I'm currently doing, yeah, absolutely. Both those things benefited me certification wise and degree wise.
And it's amazing that you've decided to, again, pursue all of that. Once you decided that this is what you like, you went all in. So you've done quite a few certifications, and then you did the master's degree, and then you mentioned that you're looking into potentially, continue, furthering your education to doing a PhD, possibly, and tying in some of the background in psychology into something called cybersecurity. Maybe you can expand on that, what that is, because I'm not familiar with that. Maybe you have that background.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it either. It actually sounds like an oxymoron, cyber psychology. So I was looking for PhD programs, not, I'm not sure if I'm going to pursue one or not, but I was like, hey, if the right one comes along and it's super interesting, like, let me pursue that. And so I came across something called cyber psychology, which looks like a fairly new field of study. I can't find much more information on it really back past like 2021. So like COVID era pandemic, we've come up with cyber psychology during this time frame. If that puts it into perspective of how short of a time it's been kind of a thought. So Capital Technology University out of DC has a cyber psychology PhD, and I believe that they stated on their website that they were one of the first, if not the first, educational facility to offer cyber psychology as a degree program. So a PhD in cyber psychology, what that kind of looked like. And I spoke with a couple people that are actually currently pursuing that degree. And they said it's all research-based because cyber psychology is so new that they really don't know what that field's going to look like. They're not even, the powers that be haven't really decided what cyber psychology is going to focus on. And doing a little digging, it looks like right now the intent is to focus on how things like social media, technology, things that humans interact with on our daily lives, how that affects our going about stuff as humans, where it's like, what's the technology's effect on humans? Teenagers have social media. So how does the daily interaction on social media for teenagers, how does that affect their mental health? Things like that. I personally think, and that's the beauty of how this is a new developing field, I think that it could also be the human's effect on technology. Again, I've talked about being interested in intelligence-driven cybersecurity and operations. So how can humans affect technology in terms of how we consider hackers are, how we consider pen testers work with, different zero-day attacks and things like that. So I'd be curious to kind of study something like that and maybe pull a cultural impact into it. Maybe we look at Asian cultures versus European cultures versus South American cultures and how they interact with technology. It could be interesting for intelligence-driven cybersecurity, but it can also be interesting for you have user interfaces. What's important to an Asian culture versus maybe a South American culture?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's an interesting piece about doing a PhD is that you have the opportunity to contribute to the space, right, as part of the research and find out something new. That's the whole point of doing a PhD is to uncover and providing contribution. So tell me, I've interviewed the folks that are in the military or they did a transition to civilian life in some capacity. And it's always fascinating to me, like how much experience you get in a fairly short amount of time when you're in the Army or in the military for that matter. It seems like the training is very intense. You get to be exposed fairly quickly to some large scale projects that are involved in human capital in terms of technology and so on. So it's almost like dog years in terms of how much exposure you get in terms of technology very quickly while you're in the military. Give me some glimpse of that, because I know you've done quite a few things in your career in the Army. Can you cover some of that?
Yeah. So, for example, if you looked at my LinkedIn, I got a number. I can count maybe a handful of 5 certifications within the time frame of like April to May of 2021. And it's because we are put through a pretty rigorous training program that provides the opportunities for you to take these certifications and get them. For one, it's important to clients that the military works with to have, a CISSP certification if maybe you're doing something. You think of DoD contractors, and there are several specific certifications that those contractors have to fulfill certain roles. So it's very similar. And then if you just can imagine the fast-paced, mentality of being in the military, there's constantly something going on in the world. And in a private corporation, I think that it is easier to react slower because those things aren't as immediately impactful. But when you consider the military and national security and things like that, those things are affecting the government, the private citizen very, very quickly. And so the military and the DoD has to react to that very quickly. So I think for us as, we're privy to that as we are service members because we are constantly doing something new. And you may go to work one day and it's one thing, and then the next day it's something completely different. And you're like, hey, we just talked about this thing, and now this new thing is coming up. Well, you have to react to it because cybersecurity is changing daily. And I think that the military gets to be the forefront of trying to figure out what to do, either to react to something or to be proactive. Just look at all the stuff going on in Europe right now. I've seen that the president has put out, hey, be aware that there are threats of cyber attacks from Russia. And so things like that, the private citizen of the United States may not have as much of an impact because perhaps maybe they don't have as important assets that maybe other countries are interested in. But when you're protecting the government's assets, it becomes incredibly more impactful to be on your toes. So we get kind of the brunt of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I'll come back to the geopolitical situation that you just mentioned, because you have background in Russian, right? You understand Russian. You have linguistic capabilities, right? In Russian
language. I have
language.
A limited language background. I have a basic elementary background in Russian and German. So I can do conversational. I can read and interpret it. I am not the best at it, but I can get pieces of that information to be able to digest it.
That's so cool, Betty. Like that's absolutely amazing. And especially now these days, it seems like it's the people that do speak Russian and have the capabilities to read Russian, for example, are so much better off because at least they can, for example, read like tweets in Russian. So, and see what's going on out there in the world. So I'll come back to that. But it's really interesting, what you mentioned that the DoD and the Army is so fast paced because somebody looking from outside in, they always think, oh, the private sector is, fast moving, but the government is super slow, because that's the almost the common conception. But what you just described is completely the opposite.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that we can't talk about that happens behind the scenes. So there's a lot of stuff going on that is not shareable with the public. So yeah, absolutely. People, I could say from personal experience, I would feel the same way if I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And I think that's with every corporation. You think, oh, well, our management is slow. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on. Maybe, your managers are up till 9, 10 o'clock working on something ridiculous, but you're like, oh, they still haven't made a decision because there's a lot of stakeholders. So maybe it's taking them a while to get everybody to agree. So I think it's very, very similar to that in the military and the government, because there's just so much work being done behind the scenes that not the public eye is not privy to. So yeah, I totally get the sentiment though, because I can see that.
And I think just even from watching, and by the way, like I'm just playing the devil's advocate, and I spent some time in the Air Force and the kind of the foreign Air Force, but it's interesting because sometimes you think, okay, like Army, like Forrest Gump, right? Like where somebody, and you're laughing, but that's every time I watch that movie, which is one of the best movies of all time, and he was doing really, really, really well because he just, he was very disciplined. He just said yes for everything, basically. So he was an exceptional soldier. But there's a lot of creativity in the armed forces. There's a lot of, responsibility taking, a lot of innovation happening as well. And so, what was your first kind of roles of like hands-on roles after you've done your certifications that you actually had the chance to experience, cybersecurity firsthand?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time in again, the Signal Corps, which is IT focused. So that's a lot of building networks and things like that. My first role in cybersecurity honestly started last year. I have been in cybersecurity for longer than that, but with the way that the military works with moving you, sometimes you're not able to move into those roles immediately because they need you somewhere else. So I'm currently working in a role like that, and it's incredibly fascinating, the people that we work with. These are some of the smartest individuals I have ever met. Having a conversation with them and coming from 5 years of focusing on cybersecurity, I thought that I had a good level of knowledge as far as what it takes to do X, Y, and Z. But these people eat, breathe, and sleep cybersecurity, and it's insane. Whether or not you're talking about developers or maybe people that are just creating solutions from a problem set, they're so incredibly smart, and it leaves me with a sense of imposter syndrome. I think to myself daily, like, am I up to snuff for this? Like, I thought that I came in with a good background, and now I'm questioning everything I thought I knew. So there is definitely a reason why the military, at least for the United States military, has done something called a direct commission, where they're pulling individuals out of colleges and giving them promotions to join the service instead of coming in as privates or lieutenants, where they would be at a lower rank. They're coming in as higher ranking individuals because they're just coming in with an enormous amount of knowledge. So there's a reason for that, and it's just really cool to be a part of.
And you're very humble. I guess you were humbled, by start working with some of these individuals. And so, out of curiosity, so these folks that are joining now from various universities or different other roles, do they still have to go through a boot camp and have the basic training and all of that, or they kind of jump into non-commissioned roles? How's that work?
I think for the most part, they're jumping into commissioned officer roles. I'm not too invested in how that looks. I know that most of them that are coming in as officers, so captains and higher, and I know that they're not really going through the same process that you would be if you're enlisting. Now, that being said, they do go through a very rigorous vetting process to make sure that they are competent enough to join at a higher level, because with lieutenants that are coming in, you spend 4 years as a lieutenant, as an officer, and you learn certain things about the military that are important for you to take in when you get promoted to captain and higher ranks. So these individuals are vetted really heavily to make sure that they can learn that stuff pretty rapidly, so they're not falling short with their peers.
And then also that also includes some sort of vetting from a clearance perspective, right? Because even for you're exposed to, things that matter of national security and so on. So you have to have some sort of clearance associated with your role. Do people, and again, this is something that most people in the civilian life are not familiar with. I think most people that are applying for a job, the best, the basic process they go through is some sort of like work history vetting, right? Or just to make sure that you don't have criminal backgrounds, which is, pretty basic. But when you are in the Army, you go through a different process, right?
It's similar. I believe that civilians and contractors that work for the government go through the same process. I don't think that anybody is prioritized over the others. I know what you're talking about as far as a public trust clearance, where you just have to make sure that, you haven't committed any felonies or misdemeanors in the past X number of years, and you don't have any indiscriminate issues in your background. I know what the clearances that the military goes through, they're all pretty much on the same level as far as how much vetting they do, based on how much in depth they go into for your clearance is based on the level that you're applying for. So, but I'm pretty sure it's similar across the civilians and the military.
And now that you've gone through a more managerial role, how has that changed in terms of like your knowledge? Do you still, trying to keep abreast of the hands-on development? As you mentioned, cybersecurity is such a fast-paced, moving discipline, right? So you have to be on top of what's going on. Do you feel that, moving to a less hands-on but more managerial role, requires you to be more persistent in terms of self-discipline and for learning, or is it something that you strive to do anyway?
Absolutely. It requires more of my personal time, I think, to keep in touch with my technical skills. That being said, I personally have a drive to go and investigate new things that I'm learning about at work and things I see on the news. So I think it takes a little bit of intestinal fortitude to make sure that you're taking care of what you need to do to stay in line with your peers. Even though you're in a management role, you don't do hands-on technical experience when you're in some of these management roles. The beauty of it is that you get to watch those people and be a part of what they're doing, and you kind of learn from osmosis. But you still definitely, I feel like I have to go home, and my husband and I will put our son to bed, and I will go get on, Hack the Box, and just try to stay up to date with what's going on and the new stuff that is coming out, zero-day attacks and things like that, even though it's not something that I really have time to do during my normal workday. So absolutely.
That, and as you mentioned, keeping abreast in terms of what's happening on the geopolitical side. So do you get sometimes, people reaching out to you, knowing, the role you fulfill and maybe asking you questions? Hey, Bailey, like, I see this on the news. I see a lot of cybersecurity, announcement or, about breaches and so on. Do you get like these calls from family members or friends asking you what your opinion about, the current affairs or just, things that happen in the news?
I think, thankfully, no. I think that majority of the people that I'm close with understand that there is a level of confidentiality that I have to maintain for my job role, which is good because I've not had to really answer those questions. So it makes life a little bit easier. I will say that I've had, family members reach out and ask general cyber questions or maybe general military questions, but nothing too specific, which is good. I think, again, like I said, I think there's this unspoken rule that's just kind of something that you don't touch. And people that are asking those questions, you kind of give a little bit more thought to, okay, why are they asking these questions? Who is this individual? So thankfully, I've not had to come across that too much. So I can appreciate that.
Spoken like a true cybersecurity professional, trust but verify. And we can always feed them misinformation. That's something that can be done as well. So tell me, what would you recommend for people that are in the same situation as you were, starting out? A lot of times people don't know what they don't know in the sense that they want to get in the field, but they fear that maybe their background is not suitable. They don't necessarily have the the acumen to start. And you've done a tremendous job at coming from a psychology major background, wanting to be a medical professional, pivoting into cybersecurity, but you've done really, really well. So what do you recommend for somebody who's kind of following the same path?
Yeah, so I would say, honestly, really the biggest thing is figuring out what you want to do. What are your interests? Cybersecurity is hugely broad. There are so many different things you can go into, from forensics to governance, risk and compliance, things that are more technical, things that are more managerial. So really sitting down and having a heart-to-heart with yourself and saying, what is it that I'm interested in and what do I want to do? And then also understanding that everybody has skills in certain things and not necessarily stepping out into the cybersecurity world and saying, I am going to do this. I'm going to be a penetration tester, because for me, I'm good at management. I'm good at managing teams. My soft skills are very managerial and team oriented. And I may not have as strong of technical skills as others do. So for me to put all my eggs in one basket and say, I'm going to be a penetration tester, this next job, that's what I'm going to get. That's a little bit arrogant on my part if I were to say that, because I need to capitalize on the skills that I'm strong in order to get my foot into the door to get to the jobs that I want to do. So that's really difficult because it's a human thing that you kind of have to humble yourself down and say, okay, I'm not skilled in this. I want to get skilled in this. So how do I make my path to get to that point? So those are the two things that I would say. Really, it's more about sitting down with yourself. I think that once you grind out those two things, you can choose your path and say, okay, these are the next few steps that I'm going to take. I mean, that's what I did. Psychology, I never had a job in psychology, but I know that medical professionals are very familiar with HIPAA, and HIPAA has a lot to do with cybersecurity as well when you're considering online appointments and things that doctors are putting on their online portals, especially because COVID has made a lot of things remote. And so if you're stepping out of a medical profession into cybersecurity, maybe you can capitalize on the fact that you know a lot about HIPAA. And then broaden what you don't know and kind of fill in those gaps along the way.
Yeah, so it's amazing that you mentioned specifically to keep an open mind, which is super important, and figure out what you like to do. And I always recommend to people to get into a role where they can, they're exposed to doing a lot of things at once. So typically smaller companies in the private sector allows you to do that. So just to do all kinds of things of trying to figure out, which area of cybersecurity specifically do you enjoy. But you've done so as well in the Army. You were exposed to a lot of different things in a fairly short period of time, and you figure out what you did not like, and then were exposed to finally something that you really enjoyed. So would you recommend people taking that route as well, just joining the Army and figure out what to do from there, because it gives you there's such a wide area of different roles you can do, and they do provide amazing opportunities to be, to get educated very quickly, like you just proved.
I would. I mean, say what you want about the military and going through basic training and things like that. If you can stomach just a little bit of discomfort for a bit of time, it is such an incredible opportunity. Because for one, you can work towards getting your education paid for through various GI Bill, things like that. They provide you, especially in the route of cybersecurity, which for the Army, I'm not sure what it is for the other service organizations, but for the Army specifically, it's a 17 series, which is a 17 Charlie or a 17 Alpha for officers. And if you go that route, I mean, you have endless opportunities to get certifications right out of the bat. You have tons of room to grow within your job, time to add stuff to your resume, which is a lot of what I see people have problems with, is that there's this never-ending cycle of, I can't get a job because I don't have experience, and I don't have experience because I can't get a job. The military aims to bridge that gap. And so, I mean, I had the opportunity to go to the Red Hat Certified System Admin course the other day, which is like a $5,000 course. It's insane, some of the price points on these courses, which for someone getting out of high school or college is just not feasible to say that that's something that they can do or afford. But the military sponsored that because I needed to take that course for my job, and I needed to better understand Red Hat Linux. So just little things like that. I mean, that's a great staple to put on my resume. And it took me a week out of my work week. So if you can stomach going to basic training and getting over the few stereotypes that we consider when you think about joining the military and things like that, it is such a great opportunity. Even just doing a couple of years and doing your service obligation and getting out, it will set you apart from your peers tremendously, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely great feedback, and I think that will allow people to get a glimpse of what it's like. And basic training is not so bad. What's the Hormesis principle, right? What doesn't kill you make you a little stronger. So I think and as you mentioned, if you can stomach that, but so in general, what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you if you wanted to, if they wanted to know more about what you've done, provide some feedback, you're at a point where you can totally mentor others to take a certain route like that as well? So what's the easiest way for people to reach you?
Yeah, so I've had a couple people reach out to me for mentorship, so I am happy to do that. The best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I have a pretty public, I don't do a lot of social media and things like that. So LinkedIn is pretty much my prominent social media that I share, my personal experiences with, even if it's just inspiring or it helps someone else out. I feel like just being a little bit vulnerable and sharing my job experience can help at least one person. That means more to me than anything else. So.
Yeah. And Bailey, again, kudos to you for getting out of the shell and doing things that you're not comfortable with. Not a lot of people are, comfortable and, speaking publicly in terms of what they've done, but you've jumped right into this interview when I offered to do one. So I really, really appreciate that. And thank you very much for sharing the story. So last question, Bailey. So what's next for you? You are like running, 100 miles an hour. You're doing all those things, and you're not stopping, not anytime soon. So what's next for you?
Yeah, I do feel like it's going crazy fast. So right now, I'm currently preparing to transition out of active duty service. I'm looking for a potential position in the next couple of months, looking about fall time frame. And I have an idea of where I want to go, but honestly, it shifts daily because, as I mentioned before, playing on my strengths and not trying to chase things that I just, chase the big grand idea of what this dream job is. I really want to round out my technical skills, and I want to be a good manager, but I also want to be technically competent. So that's why I'm choosing to leave the service and pursue either a private sector opportunity or a DoD contracting job. But I'm pretty excited about it. It'll give me an opportunity to stabilize my family as well. So I'm looking forward to opportunities that come my way. And right now, I'm just really enjoying networking with people that have either left the service or they're currently in the private sector, because there is just a multitude of amazing people willing to share their experiences out there. You just have to ask.
Yeah, absolutely, Bailey. And I think that the cybersecurity community is really, truly amazing one. There's just so many people out there that are willing to step in and help out to others as well. Whether it's in advice, contribution, or, providing the connections, whatnot. It really is a tremendous community to be part of. Again, Bailey, thank you very much for joining today. And I cannot wait to see where you go next. And maybe we'll do a 5-part series where like every few months you come on the show and we talk about your new experiences, maybe like the experience of transition from military to the civilian, because that's that's a hot topic that a lot of military service people are concern, and they also like to know more about that particular process. So maybe we'll do a 5-part series at some point. We'll start with this one. But until then, thank you very much for joining. And again, looking forward to seeing you at the next event. And for those who joined, thank you very much. Stay safe online as well as offline. Thanks, Bailey.